Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. I had a lot of requests to paint this birch tree. This is one of my plein air sketches from vacation, and I painted it sitting on the ground looking up at the tree. So we have this little bit of a foreshortening going on here, and we're going to start by sketching that on. So I'm starting here on kind of one of the edges of the paper, and I'm just kind of watching that line, kind of curving it up, and this branch was kind of twisting up to the light. And I'm going to start here a little bit past the midpoint of the paper, and I'm just sketching that on again. And then I'm putting in a few branches. Not a lot of, I'm not doing a lot to this here. And then there'll be a lot of little darker branches that we'll be putting on right with the paint. But that's really all we need to get going with this. Now we're going to take a large soft brush, and I use this a lot on vacation. This is a 1/2 inch Zen oval wash, or you could call it a filbert, or some companies call it a cat's tongue. You can find this from various manufacturers. Let's see, I've used Princeton Neptune, they're really good. The Mimic from Jerry's Artorama. This one I picked up at Michael's for about $5. So, you know, you can get a decent brush nowadays. I will tell you, this one is a little bit floppier. If you've been using it like for quite a while, even though it is a synthetic, it does really feel like a natural hair, because it does kind of will get a little floppy and lose its snap. So I probably recommend the Princeton Neptune of this type of brush if you can swing it. And I'm going to grab some ultramarine blue. I'm using Cotman watercolors, a little ultramarine there. And I'm going to add more pigment towards the top of the paper than the bottom, and I'm just going to kind of let it flow down. The nice thing about a brush like this is that it holds a lot of paint and water, and so like if you're painting outdoors, as long as you can have like a little cup of water with you, this is great, because generally like painting outside in the summertime, things dry really quickly, and it can be kind of problematic if you're trying to do like a big wash or anything. There, I'm not going to put a ton of time into that. Now another thing you're going to want while you're working on this is a cut up piece of credit card. I've got a few in here. I like to kind of cut them like this so that I have a wide edge, and then I have a narrower edge, because I'll use that to scrape and pull paint and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up my gray, and I'm going to use ultramarine blue, and I am going to use some burnt sienna, which is a kind of like a reddish brown. You could also use light red or Indian red or English red. Most of those pigments you'll find are made with the pigment PR 101, and it's that orangey red color that interacts with the blue and gives you that nice gray. And you can add more brown if you want to have it more, if you want to have it warmer, add more blue if you want to have it cooler. So we have that right there. Now something I kind of like to do is just kind of splotch on my paint. And I'm not gonna worry about some of it getting into the background, because then any place it goes in the background will be my kind of curled bark areas. And then I'm gonna actually pick up some paint with my credit card scraper, and I'm gonna scrape some of it around. Now the paper I'm working on is a very inexpensive paper. It's called, and I'm doing these scrapey lines kind of in an arc, and more of a dramatic arc as it goes up, so it gives me that impression of something round being foreshortened. We'll do that more with a brush in a minute, but I just wanted to kind of get that on now. So yeah, I don't care if any of that goes out of the line, because I'm going to make use of that. Now the downside to this brush is that it holds so much water that it can be difficult to mix a dark color, especially when you're using a student grade paint such as Cotman. So what I'm going to do is switch over to this kind of acrylic painter's brush, and it's not going to hold as much water, and it's nice and stiff, so it's really going to grab that paint. And look how much thicker that paint is on my palette. Okay, so I'm gonna make a darker, almost a black shade using those same two colors. And I'm going to put that on my palette. And since it doesn't hold so much water, it's not going to deposit the other color into your watercolor and make your palette that dirty either. So I can go in here even with this brush, and I can add some marks. This is still wet, so nothing is going to be really really defined at this point, so I don't really have to worry about it too much. And again, I can go and maybe pick up some paint with the narrower side, and remember, when you scrape it on, scrape it in an arc. And your arc can be fairly shallow here, but as you get up, you want it much steeper, so it looks like the tree is going away from you. You're looking up at it, so you're going to see those lines in the birch tree become more rounded. Okay, so at this point I want to dry my painting. I'll pause it while I do that. And we're all dry there. So when I'm working in the field, I often have these water brushes as well, in addition to that big brush. And I'm going to do some of the details here with this water brush. Now, the challenge with a water brush, if you've never used one before, is that many of them continuously feed out water. That can be very helpful, or it can be kind of a learning curve. So here I'm mixing out a fairly dark black again, using those two colors. And I'm going to go in and start to add some splotches, and I'm using some of my some of the shapes that my credit card scraper made as a guide. I'm trying to be really random because I don't want to have predictable looking shapes, if that makes sense. So like here I can see I've got this kind of piece of bark. It looks like I've got a little piece of bark kind of coming off the tree, so I'm gonna accentuate that by shading in here. And I think I'll add some of the burnt sienna to that. And as you start adding detail, some of the details are going to look real awkward at first, and that's completely normal, so don't be alarmed. Now see that where I scribed and actually damaged the paper a little bit? It's going to really make it look like bark kind of rolling off the tree, and that's kind of what we want here. We want that look. It's always different to paint something in the studio after you've painted it in the field, because you get kind of used to not having to talk and just kind of intuitively painting it, and then you're trying to explain it, and it's like, well, what did I do here? I can't remember my process. It's kind of funny. Now these colors that we're using are sedimentary colors, meaning they lift very well. So if you do get something that you need to remove, as long as it's not in an area you've scraped and is damaged, you will be able to wet it and blot it off, which is, I think, very forgiving and kind of nice about these colors. And you'll find that happens more often with the student grade paint. They're a little bit easier to lift because of there's a little bit more filler in student paint, so you know it can be an advantage depending on the type of work you're doing. It would be a disadvantage if you were doing like a floral and you needed to glaze. So just, you know, think about the paints that you have and what their traits are. So I feel like I need a little bit of warmth in here. So I'm going in with some of just the brown kind of watered down. That's the burnt sienna, same brown. And I also am going to add yellow ochre, which is this yellow right here. It looks like Dijon, Grey Poupon mustard, kind of. And I try to just put stuff everywhere when I go to add it in. Actually, I think I'd rather do that with a bigger brush, because I want it a little bit more diluted and I want it a little more random looking. So if I pick that up with that bigger brush, a lot more water, I can just kind of splooch it on here and there and have it very random. Okay, so something else I want to do, and I can work on this while that's drying, is I'm going to throw in some branches. And the branches on birch trees are quite dark, which is great because you don't have to worry about masking or leaving that white area. So I am using a fine tip water brush. This is the Niji water brush, and I like the medium tip an awful lot. The fine tip, though, I don't love as much, and one of the reasons is because it continuously is feeding water faster than I seem to need it. So so that would be great if you're doing like brush lettering or something, but I find for like detailing my watercolors, I find it to be a little problematic. But, you know, the thing is, not to despair if you get something that it doesn't really flow with the way you work. You'll adapt to it, especially if you take it out painting, because when you're out painting and you don't have all the supplies you're used to, you adapt and you learn how to use them. So I think that I often enjoy taking supplies I don't often use out painting in the field, because then they kind of, I'll find a way to work with them and they become less precious, or a lot of times they just become used, because I'm kind of like, well, it's kind of like something you don't think is very useful, so you're like, well, I'm just gonna use it, I'll make the best of it, and then you end up really liking it. So I think I'm gonna take some sap green. I love that color. And I'm actually gonna move this for a second because I want to splatter some of that on there. Make it nice and juicy, because the leaves are going to be very indistinct. Okay, and then I'm going to take some of that color, and I'm going to mix this with my acrylic brush again. You can mix it with your water brush, something where you're going to have a stiffer bristle and not so much paint. I'm going to do some of that color with some yellow ochre. Make a nice lighter leaf, and I'm going to do some of that with some of my ultramarine blue. And you're probably thinking, why are you using ultramarine blue? That's not a very greeny blue. Basically because I already used it, and I like to keep a limited palette whenever possible, because your painting will look better even if it's not as vibrant or as accurate as what you see. We're using burnt sienna, yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, sap green. Is that it? Are we only using 4 colors? I really like it because it really makes things look more natural. Okay, so I'm going to put a few of those darker leaves in. I don't like that brush. I'm going to go to my I'll go to my water brush here. And so if I'm using a water brush in the field, what I do is just keep a rag and I squeeze it and wipe it off, and then I go into my color to clean it. If I'm in the studio, I'll just rinse it in the water. A few of those. It's a pretty color. I like that color. I like all colors. A few of these darker ones, especially up top. And we'll put in, I could just squeeze it, wipe it on a rag. Put in some later ones. And I can go in with just some, dabbed on straight sap green leaves when this dries, which I probably will. And I could have added lemon yellow because I don't have a ton of colors in here yet, but I really urge you to use as few colors as you need to tell the story. Okay, so we're gonna let that dry. And let's see, how's that doing? That's still pretty wet. I'm gonna hit that with the dryer again. Well, actually, while it's still wet, where's my credit card? Let's do a little more scraping. Okay, now I'm just gonna dry it real quick. We gotta build up our layers, and that's what's gonna give it that detailed look. I'm not gonna care about drying the treetops too much, just wanna get this area in here dry so I can work on top of it. Something I forgot to do was leave some space for the moss to be growing on the tree. So what I think I'm gonna do is see what I can scrub out. And this is gonna actually add some texture to it. I'm not gonna be able to scrub a ton out just because I've already been scraping the paper, and this is not a very durable paper. But I could probably get get enough out so that I can put my moss on there. And let me just blot that. So I've lightened that up enough that I can go in with some sap green and some yellow ochre and add some moss. Just dabbing it in there. And it's going to be darker wherever it's hit some paper that's kind of damaged from our scraping. Alright, so now we're going to go in with some darker colors. Again, that same mix, so I'm mixing up a little bit more blue, a little bit more burnt sienna. And I'm going to start adding my deepest values. This is such a fun project. I think I'm going to switch to my smaller brush though. Dry it off. I remember having to dry off this brush a lot when I was using it in the field. This is the mini koi water brush, and you can take it apart and it actually comes into 2 pieces about that long, and there's a little plug if you want to keep your water in there. It's It's handy. I just feel like the little mini one, it has great detail, but when it feeds the water out, especially if you're doing a dark detail like this, it tends to water it down a little too much. But just keep a napkin handy, and you can blot it as you go if you need to. Or you might just find an area that needs a little bit of a wash, and you can go and add that. Just keep your lines, think of how the striation on a birch tree goes, and make sure your lines are in agreement with that. So like these curls of bark are going to be circular, and any sort of veining on those are going to go with that circular shape. Okay, they're all going to have those ellipses. I'm just going to keep that in mind as you go. And you can see it's kind of like a magic trick. I mean, getting these little, it's just a few little brush strokes here and there makes it look like peeling bark. It's nothing scary. It's nothing, if you know how to do it, it's like a magic trick. If you know how to do it, it's easy. I want you guys all to be painting birch trees. I want you to share them with me. I want you to show me what you've done. Show me what you've created. You can always share your photos in the Facebook group. You can send me a message on the Frugal Crafter Facebook page if you're shy about sharing it in the group. That's a little too dark, so what I do there is just blot and lighten it right up. You're going to get really good at mixing gray by the end of this because you do have to do it quite a bit. Mix up a little bit more. We got the blue, we got our brown. That's a magic trick, isn't it? Blue and brown makes black. I just really like this. You know, you could do red and green, but it would be a little more staining of a color, and I like this color because I can lift it if I decide I need to lighten something. And if you try to lift, like, say if you use a crimson and sap green and you try to lift it, you might end up with a pink stain, and that might not be what you want. I'm going to do a little bit of shading around the moss down here. Can even put a little bit of dabbing in there, and then I think I want to go in with my big brush again and actually put a little bit of cool gray in there. And it looks like I have some pretty much on my palette. I just dabbed into the blue just to cool it off a little bit more, so it can kind of counteract some of the areas. And I'm just gonna very loosely add some of that in. Probably got my tree a little darker than I wanted, than I did in the original, but that happens. I always find that my my sketches back home are less accurate than what I did in the field, and I did spend a little more time on this in the field. But there you have how to create this birch tree in watercolors. I hope you found it useful. I did say I was going to go back in with a little bit of the sap green on its own and dab in a few more leaves, so I'll do that right now. But if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. I'll try to help you out if I can. I could also use to darken up my branches there a little bit, so I'll do that real quick. And some of them might smudge a little bit. I should probably dry this first, but I just wanted to show you that. And then this won't be a terribly long video, but then you could take your sketch pad and your paints outside, find a tree, sketch it, have fun, enjoy the summer, and really have fun painting. If I can help you have fun painting, then my day is complete. You've made my day. I want this branch to kind of wrap around. There you go. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up, and if you're not already, hit that subscribe button, and we'll have some more watercolor tutorials coming up for you, and I have lots in the archives to keep you busy. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting. Wait, before I go, one quick tip. If you want to lighten up some of these areas I just did there and there, I wanted to test it out, just wet your brush, a stiff brush, scrub gently and lift it with a paper towel, and you can reclaim some whites if you did get a little too dark. I was noticing this was way darker than my original, so hopefully that'll help you if you end up in that predicament as well, and you can lighten those areas right up. So I always like to share these little teachable moments, and I hope you found it useful. Again, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.